Hello and welcome back to Free Speech with CR. I'm Molly Blakemore, and today we're having more of a fun conversation about beekeeping, and I'm here with my co-host, Keith Flamer.
Molly, it's great to be here with our beekeepers extraordinaire.
Thanks.
So let's talk about the science of beekeeping.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what should people know about beekeeping itself? Because like I think others like me would just go to the store, pick it up, and not even think about how it got to the shelf. So talk to us about how does whatever beekeeping does get to this part?
The honey specifically.
Yes.
The science there, because there's so much science. It's such a scientific thing in itself. Like it's all science. But if we wanted to focus on a specific aspect of the scientific.
Well, how scientific is it? Because I think you're excited to talk about the science of beekeeping.
Yeah, I'm excited about the hive.
The whole thing from beginning to on our plates, if you will.
Where should we start?
Maybe start talking about their home. Where do we keep our bees?
Okay. It's hard for me because it's like, oh, it's all connected. There's so many places. There are so many things we can do. So there is a colony. The colony is where all the bees are together. And it's kind of interesting because a single bee is an organism, but the colony is itself is also an organism. It's a super organism. So you have like every individual bee, but what they are supporting in the colony is its own living thing. So when the bees swarm, that's actually their reproductive purpose is to extend the life of that particular colony. So when we're keeping bees, we'll have them in hives, and you'll see the vertical boxes. And what we're trying to do is balance what the bees are needing to maintain their healthy life, their healthy homeostasis, so that they can thrive as individual little bees and then also as their full organism, like the full organism. And then as beekeepers, we might have certain goals that we want to do. Like we might want to have a year where we produce a lot of honey. So we might be doing certain management practices where we're trying to create a colony that will produce a surplus of honey where the bees have enough to make it through the year. And then we have enough to also harvest. Another goal might be to have just a lot of colonies. If we want a lot of colonies or we want to sell bees, sometimes they say like, is your goal money or honey? Do you want to create bees and sell those as a product?
Money or honey?
Yeah, because if you're trying to produce multiple colonies to sell or just to have, like that might decrease your honey yield because you're focusing on building the colony size rather than the capacity of what a big colony can do. But it's just different hive management practices, which is very, very dependent on paying attention to their biology. What are they doing? What are they telling us? When we're going into a hive, we're looking at what are the bees doing? How are they doing it? Are they showing signs of good health? Might there be something where there's an imbalance with the colony itself? Is the queen having a problem? Is the queen healthy? There's a lot of attention to parasites, disease. I think most of our management, is managing for pests and disease and parasites.
So what do you say? What are they doing? What are they doing? What could they be doing? What are the different things they could be doing?
Mostly, I think when it's building up to a lot of different aspects of that, but really looking at like the brood, like the little baby bees. Are they looking healthy? What are they doing? I think essentially, what are the bees doing to do what they need to do at that point in time in the season? And so, is their behavior and their level of brood and how much food they're bringing in or not bringing in, is that a sign of a healthy hive doing what it should be at that point of the year? Because that all can look different depending on when we're in there. And all of that is biology driven, like what the bees need to sustain their queen, their colony, bring in food sources. Um, it's all it's all based in their biology. Oh, do you have this?
I think it's interesting that the bees have different roles. So the queen does have some sort of this management structure of the bees behave in certain ways depending on if the queen is there or not there. If there's bees without a queen, they can be really kind of cranky and aggravated because they're stressed. Where's our queen? So there's sort of a leadership structure in there to sort of superimpose values on that. And then the worker bees, their job is to maintain the hive and collects the pollen and the nectar. And they live for different time periods. In the summer, they're working so hard collecting that pollen and nectar. They only live for 6 weeks, right?
Is that all? Really?
Yeah. And then winter bees.
Up to 6 months. Actually, longer than that. One time I marked some bees in April, and I found those same bees like 8 months later. The winter bees are the bees that are trying to sustain the hive over the winter, so that the bees can do what they need to do in the spring, and they can live a very, very long
And
time.
what do they do to maintain the hive during the winter?
They're collecting resources. They are
So they're leaving and getting still pollen and pollen.
Yeah, they'll still foraging, but it's a little bit of a rougher lifestyle. But really, they have the way I don't know if it's necessarily known how or why they're fatter, but they're actually fatter bees. They have fat. They have a
Allergic to-
higher, yeah, like what's called fat bodies that they use to sustain their life. The fat body is like this essential organ in the bee that's kind of similar to our liver, and it really regulates so many aspects of how the bees are just living and carrying out their functions and doing their functions as um, nurse bees. Um,
Mm.
and normally, that's like up to like I think like about a 6 week, maybe 4 week lifespan that a bee might be living in the colony without foraging or maybe involving foraging. But these winter bees, these fat bees, they're living for like 6 months to 8 months because they need to possibly make it through in a time there's no ability to forage. It might be snowing, might be really crappy weather. They have to be able to survive. Um, so I don't know. I feel like
How long
it's
does
pretty
the
real
no,
that,
how
but
long does queen live?
it can be a long time. They can live, I think, about 5 years. Yeah, about 3 to 5 years. Yeah, but typically beekeepers, if they're wanting to have a high honey yield, they might be replacing her every 1 to 2 years, so that she's kind of governing a hive that will continue to produce a lot of the personalities, I guess, or a lot of the inner workings of the hive and their function is determined by the queen.
Wait, so I find this fascinating. Are you saying bees have personalities?
Oh yeah, yeah. That hive.
Really?
Yeah, kinda, like, some are really feisty, like, I have some that love the sting, like, they let you know that they don't like you. I have some that are very, very calm, very docile, like, you can pick them up and they won't even bother you.
Really?
Yeah, some are kinda, will ebb and flow between that.
And that's all directed by the queen.
Yeah, the queen's temperament, the queen's ability, the queen's health. Sometimes if we have a hive that was once.
How did the queen become a queen?
Oh my God, that's a great question.
We might not want Angela to talk about this.
I already needed section 456. Yeah, I'll let you do it.
Simplistic process, eat the bees. She gets special food and special attention. She has a from the bees, the worker bees. So it's called a queen cell. So it's a much larger cell than on a regular frame that goes in a hive. And so she's fed royal jelly, which has these special properties that help that queen grow into a different.
That's amazing.
Her, like, what is the first thing that gets her the bigger cell and
The bees determine that. Yeah, they'll will determine if they need a queen, usually on a couple different circumstances. One is the queen might die, and they're like, "Oh, we don't have a queen. We need to make a queen stat." And
That-
yes, and they will take an existing egg worker or an egg, like a regular egg, and they will feed it a special diet so that it'll have the nutrients to be able to produce a queen. And we can see that. Like we can very clearly see the way that the frame looks and the queen cells are like, oh, queen died, shoot. And then the bees might not like their queen and they might decide like, we don't like you anymore. Like for whatever reason, we don't want you to be our queen. And they will supersede the queen. And again, they'll pick whatever eggs they decide. And at day 3, they start feeding this special diet to make a queen, or they might swarm and they might
So this
reproduce
isn't
that way.
in the egg. It's before the bee is actually a bee.
Yeah. And so it's sometimes it can be kind of tricky. Like, does the queen determine that the new queen is needed, or does the worker bees? And that's where it can be unknown.
So when they want a queen, what do they do with the old queen?
Sometimes they go over, yeah, up with the 2 queen. Yeah, sometimes the 2 queen colonies. Like I don't know. Like, does the queen, if a bee is sick, like often they will just leave the colony, like they exit themselves. So we don't know if the queen leaves. We don't know if the bees kill her, or she just dies on her own. It's the big mystery that happens in the hive.
Yeah. Sometimes they swarm, and so then in that case, she's leaving with half the colony.
Oh, and so they just split.
How often do you look at your bee boxes? How often do you have to look at them?
Depends on the time of year. Like this time of year, like I very infrequently. It's a little bit colder. I don't really need to. It's been actually a while since I've done my last inspection.
So did you bring a box with you today to take a look
We
at?
did, yeah. There's a lot of obviously a lot of things we can talk about once I bring this out. But it'll touch on a lot of the things that we've been discussing today. But yeah, in the maybe the springtime, once a week we'll get in our hives. We'll talk about it. But this actually, let's just start with this. This is what's called a nuke box. If we need to have
It's called a what? I'm sorry.
a nuke box, a nucleus colony. Normally beekeepers will have a box with 10 frames in it, but this one just has 5.
Okay.
But if we need to have a smaller colony for whatever reason, or if like maybe we're just starting a brand new colony and we just need it to be a smaller size, we'll have something like this. But this is an example of a frame, like a frame of comb. The bees will build out their comb, and this will be where, depending on where it is in the hive and the needs, this might be all brood. So baby bees, their eggs, their larvae. Take a when it's new, like this is a newer frame. It's very white. It's brand new wax. Their little architectures. They have these little like hexagons that they're making that. But this particular frame was used for just brood.
Okay. So the people that aren't visually looking,
Yes.
so what we're looking at is the oblong or rectangle frame with traditional, I guess, what's it called? Bee combs?
Yeah, it's bones. Yeah, it's
What?
wax that bees will produce to create.
Oh, the bees produced that.
And they'll create this comb that will stretch over the entire length of the frame. And as beekeepers, we'll have 5 to 10 of these frames in a box. And then the bees can decide what they need to use that for. Do they need to store their babies in it? Do they need to store food in it?
So you will put a new bees into a box that already has some honeycombs in it, or some.
Ideally, yeah.
Oh, is that right? Okay. All right.
And they will expand on it. You can also just use an empty tray.
Empty frame and they rebuild it.
Yeah, like this one, for example, I had some leftover honeycomb from a different scenario that I didn't want to waste. And so I used rubber bands to strap it inside of the frame. And then the bees will build the rest of their comb around that.
Very cool.
Wow.
And they don't build comb year round. They usually only do it when there's incoming nectar sources, when it's just kind of time to build the colony. Usually around swarming time and honey extraction time. That's when they start building a lot of comb because they want to be a big colony.
So Angela's using a hive tool right now, which is sort of a long, metallic tool that's got a little hook on it that allows you to hook underneath the ears of the frame. And it's really helpful, and especially if you can imagine this box being full of bees. And putting bees in, yeah, that tool is really useful for that.
And so how do you harvest honey from this? We have all these bees that are
Yeah.
and so
Let me
I guess I'm thinking that when you take the box out and you have all these bees saying, "What are you doing to my home?"
Pretty much, they're very angry. Usually that time of year, they're feisty anyway.
They're
But this is an example. This is a frame, the same rectangle wooden frame with some white wax over it, and underneath this white wax is actually honey. And this is when we're beekeepers. This is really desirable. This is what we would probably want to extract from. It's very clean. bees haven't been walking all over it. Like, it's not gonna give us any off flavors from just,
Feet?
yeah, I do. But like you can smell it. It's a little musty because it hasn't been in my storage, but like if you smell it, like you can kind of smell the waxy smell or honey smell. Um, so as beekeepers,
Well,
we
it's
might
much heavier than I thought.
yeah, one frame can hold like a pole and one also honey.
Smells just fabulous.
Yeah, this one's probably just shy of a quart right here. This is actually a small frame. But as beekeepers, when we're wanting to extract honey, we might do an inspection where we look at where are the best frames. We're going to determine how much do the bees need to have for their own food supply for the rest of the year, and then what's left over that we can take. And typically, we want to grab the frames that are the whitest and the prettiest. But sometimes we have frames that might be closer to the bees' source of food. So this is all honey. This is the same honey, but this has been closer to where the bees are feeding.
So it's
and
much
using
darker.
Exactly. It's darker, the comb is darker, the wax is darker. The honey might be the same color, but it looks darker because it's up against a dark background. But the bees are walking over this all the time. They're using this for their own food sources. And so some beekeepers will extract from this for their honey supplies. Some won't. If I do, then I'll separate the two kinds so that I have the more stuff that's cleaner and the stuff that's not, maybe not as pristine. And this typically will crystallize faster because it has other elements to it other than honey. Like we might have a little bit more pollen in this type of frame, which
And you
makes it
said you would
edible.
get a whole quart of honey from one frame from this frame?
Could be, yeah, up to a quart, yeah.
Again, I find this fascinating. Just want you to know when I was telling some colleagues that we're going to do a podcast about beekeeping today, and they asked, okay, ask them why are bees. I mean that we hear stories about how important bees are to our environment.
Mm-hmm.
Save the bees, yeah.
So what does that? So does that actually? I would have to. Is that a thing?
Yes. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack with that. Yeah. So you would bias. Yeah, but it's a really good question. So we've been talking about Apis mellifera, which is the European honeybee. So bees that we keep in hives, are not native to the United States or California.
Is that right?
But they're because of their biology and behaviors, they're easy to, kind of maintain in this way and are really important for our food systems in the United States. But there are so many different pollinators out there. So native bees in California, numbers I've read, there's about 3,500 native to California. And then
3,500 different
types of bees. Fun. So you have different species of bees, but they don't collect and live in a hive like European honeybees do. That's what makes them so special. But those native bees are really important for pollinating native plants and other parts of our ecosystem.
So do these bees compete with native bees for food and so I'm trying to think of like fish. So we put a fish in a lake that they compete against native fish. So are the native fish then depleted because of the invasive species?
Well, these bees are harder to keep alive than you would think. So they're not all really like thriving in the wild like our invasive species might. Also, a lot of our native bees are really highly specialized for specific plants that these bees can't even utilize. So
Right.
yeah, so there's some, there's research happening on that, including at our own CR Shively farm. We have a hedgerow and riparian restoration project with Point Blue Conservation Science and their Roots program. And so we have some studies happening looking at the honeybees and the native pollinators and the killers bands when I was going to nice.
Yeah, the Africanized bees. That's pretty nice. But yeah. So the Apis mellifera, that's one type of honeybee, and there's other subspecies of honeybees and other species of honeybees throughout Europe and in Asia and Africa. And the Africanized honeybee, Scrutella, I think is the name for it. There was one place where I knew how to pronounce it. I think it's Apis scrutella. It's a bee that's very, very defensive of its colony, and it peripherate. Like it is just so um it is designed to thrive, and so it will breed with the Apis mellifera that we're taking, and it will just kind of like take over from there.
So it is an invasive species.
Yeah, highly invasive, and it's spreading. It's spreading really, really quickly. But that's an example of it's another type of pollinator. It looks the same as the honeybees that we know. It exists here. People keep them. But
Really, they do.
yeah, some places you can't
Wow.
avoid it. Like it's just so such a high concentration of this type of honeybee. But it's just the way it is down there. But yeah, with the native pollinators, there are different qualities of ways that they pollinate, or they might have different physiological like ways about themselves, like maybe a longer tongue, or they can buzz and not pollen loose, where honeybees might not be able to access that. So there are some points when they can
Is
maybe.
that why they buzz?
I didn't. Seriously.
They vibrate to not
Yeah,
loose.
bumblebees actually they do. That's a myth, but ours and always and yes, the honeybees are built for buzz pollination, but they don't buzz the same way. But the bumblebees will use their actual they'll buzz their abdomen, and that will knock
Very
some
cool.
pollen loose.
I mean, it
He's
makes
also
perfect sense.
yeah,
Yeah.
he's also dance.
Mhm.
Oh yes, I've heard.
Really? I thought that was only in a bee movie, but he's actually that.
So use that to communicate. But yeah, the honeybees that we know and that we think of with these are actually a livestock product, and they're protected by the Department of Agriculture as livestock. They're and even honey has a very specific definition that is like protected by the FDA. So it's a thing that we bring to America to help with pollination of specific crops, like we were talking about with the honey with the what is it the almonds and the ways that things are managed to support the agriculture industry. But a lot of times they get mistaken that people think that these are native, and they're not. They're not native to our area. We just see them a lot. They become very common and very normal, and they are pollinators, but they're not a pollinator that's native to our particular area.
But if you don't want to be a beekeeper and you want to support pollinators and our native pollinators, you can plant native plants. That's a good way to support them. And then there's also mason bees are a native bee that folks can kind of keep in their yard. There's little, you can build like a little house with sticks and things and support those mason bees in your yard.
So yeah, we only have a few minutes left. So what if someone wants to get into beekeeping? How would they do that? What do you recommend? And where can you do it? Can you do it in, this city of Eureka? How much land do you have to have? What are the rules around that?
Yeah, depending on where you live, there might be ordinances. Like Eureka has an ordinance, so people really do need to do well. You want to do some research. Like it's not something you want to go into without having a knowledge base of again the bee biology and the laws around bees. Like California actually has very specific laws related to beekeeping, and then every city will have their own ordinances with how much space you need, how much room you need to have between your neighbors. So starting to do some research is always a good first step. Humboldt has a class. I think every February is when it starts through extended education. That can be a nice way to get your foundations, learn what you need, get the knowledge base to get ready. And they do connect with getting the actual bees as part of the class. So somebody could go out of that class like ready to go.
You can also join the local beekeeping association, the Humboldt County Beekeepers. They're helpful. And Angela is actually
Even before you have bees?
yeah, totally. And
You have to know that. Okay.
yeah, and there's actually sort of a certificate program through the University of California Ag and Natural Resources Extension called the Master Beekeeper. Angela has started that pathway. I haven't grown that yet. So
That's an online class?
Yeah, it's a certification program. Yeah.
I'm asked to be
yeah, one of our own.
famous.
Oh, guys. No, but that's another way. They have different levels that people can interact with depending on how much knowledge they have. Like if they're just starting from the ground, they can start at the first level, or if they have some beekeeping experience, go on to the second level. And it's a nice way to learn more. It covers a lot of the disease, a lot of the
This is a
parasite.
certification.
Yeah. A lot of policy is what we go into. But yeah, it's a nice way to really learn more of that depth of what the bees need to be healthy so that we can be better beekeepers.
Wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
So, what was your favorite honey?
They were all fantastic. They were all fantastic. So are there any things that you would like us to know about beekeeping that we didn't ask you? Because I find this a fascinating topic. I'm not even sure what to ask to right at this point, but what did we miss?
Seems like we could talk forever.
I know. That's why I do the deep breath. I'm like, oh, it's so hard to just pick one. And how much time do we have is the other factor. It's really hard for me to know when to stop. So yeah, I guess honey, we could talk about how honey is like actually made. That could be a real quick thing.
But here's the one thing we haven't talked about it. What are your worst stories?
Oh gosh, the worst stories. I don't know if I can tell mine on live TV. What do I?
Angela has a terrible photo of a unfortunate bee sting on my face that she's saving for when I retire for CR.
This is pretty very negative spells complication. Man, you look so young.
Right. So really, Prickle, what are the worst stories? Like what stands out as something you never want to repeat as a beekeeper?
I learned to never wear tight black pants during a bee check because black is very triggering to bees.
Oh.
And bees can they can sting through your fabric. And I was wearing black pants, and it was right before a storm when bees were particularly agitated. And I just lifted up the hive just a little bit to do a really simple maneuver, and all the bees came flooding out.
Angela, oh my gosh.
A carpet of bees on the pants, stinging.
Angela,
I have never felt so alive in my life at that moment. He said, "Caso Elias."
I thought I saw that in the movie. What happened to you?
As a result of that, I stripped down all my clothes in the middle of the yard. My adrenaline was through the roof. I was like trying to hit him off all parts of my body. I ran around half naked in a bee suit in my backyard trying to figure out my next steps. All right. That was my worst story, but it was a pretty cool story.
That's a great story.
Yeah.
I'm glad that we did capture that for.
Yes, and that's a great place to end. Yes. Okay, well, so welcome.
This has been Free Speech with CR. We hope you enjoyed our guests, Angela Stewart and Valerie Elder, local beekeepers. And I want to thank Dr. Keith Flamer for being my co-host today.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great story.
Bring me some cold reason.